Hi there, I'm Leanna Chamish, the ghost of Fanex past, here to bring you another piece of fandom history courtesy of the Fanex Film Expo. This video features a one-of-a-kind event held at Fanex 15, July 2001 in Baltimore, Maryland. Guests for the weekend were Hammer stars Barbara Shelley, Veronica Carlson, Yvonne Monlar, Jackie Joseph, and Jonathan Hayes. Forry Ackerman was also present, which allowed Fanex to do the first and only fanzine editor's tribute to Forrest J. Ackerman. Many fanzine editors from around the country came together at Fanex 12 to finally meet each other in person and trade stories about the joys and horrors of producing a fanzine, although most had moved way beyond the fanzine stage. Each editor signed a one-of-a-kind poster that was proudly presented to Forry. Of course, in true Forry fashion, it was up on eBay a few months later.
Forry Ackerman has influenced so many people, but he's also influenced so many magazines. And we've always been very proud of Fanex because we consider ourselves the most literate of conventions. All our writers attend, not all of them, but a lot of our writers attend. And a lot of the mags are here, and we're just very proud of that fact. And this year we thought we'd do something different. We're going to honor Forry, but we're going to have the editors come up and say how they were inspired by Famous Monsters and Forry. We have a poster here that they're all going to sign, their mags are on. And we're going to start with probably the longest running fanzine in the country, which just happens to be ours.
Go ahead, yeah.
So we're going to have Gary is the editor of Midnight Marquee Monsters, which was formerly Gore Creatures, which is now 38 years old. And the editor of our new magazine, Mad About Movies, Gary J. Savela.
Give it to 20. Let us stay on for a half
hour. Thank you, Sue. Forry, we are here to honor you tonight. I'm wearing my original Famous Monsters Vice President button. The real McCoy, which I have kept all of these years. Now, of course, Sue had mentioned the fact that in 1963, at age 13, I began my own mini Famous Monsters. And the thing that's amazing is the fact that Famous Monsters of Film Land literally became a beacon for a generation of monster kids that were brought together because of this wonderful man and his magazine. I wanted to say three things that I think Forry has given us, and I think this becomes important. I think the first thing is he taught us to remember the past. Back in 1958, 59, 60, Forry was telling us, Lon Chaney shall not die. He was telling us about those great films of the 30s and 20s. Now, 1960, those silent films were 40 years old. Today, we're 40 years beyond those golden years, 1960 of Famous Monsters. But Forry kept saying, remember the past. And I think that becomes very important. Then, number two, Forry has given us a sense of being one. And I think this is important because a lot of us kids that love these films, fantasy films, science fiction films, and horror films, didn't have a lot of friends. In school, in the neighborhood, we had some friends, but we didn't have friends that really understood why we love these types of films. The other kids were playing baseball or working on cars, and we're here, talking about monsters. But Forry really gave us a sense that that was okay, and he gave us a forum. When you had your letter column, this was a chance for kids across the U.S. to kind of share their love, their passion, their feeling about the articles, the movies. But it gave a focus. It allowed us to kind of create, I think, the third point, and that is a sense of community. And this became very, very important because a lot of us, again, were loners or people who didn't have a lot of friends who understood all of this. And I think that this gave us a sense that we were okay. He validated this hobby. He made it important for us. He made it worthwhile. And in a certain sense, I guess Forry was the shepherd, and we were his sheep, and he protected us. And even today, he's still our great champion, and still is protecting us. So Forry, I just wanted to say thank you for the influence and inspiring us, and let's hope you're going to do it to a lot more generations of fans. Shake it up. People who sign, give it a couple shakes. You got silver, you got gold.
Our next editor is the editor of Chiller Theater magazine, Kevin Clement.
Hey, Forry, how's it going? I just wanted to say that there are two people in my life that influenced me as a kid. One was Zachary the Cool Ghoul in the New York area. He was also Roland in Philadelphia. And of course, Forry with Famous Monsters of Filmland. Now, to show you what kind of influence he gave on me and my whole life, at my wedding, everybody got a Famous Monsters button, an original one. It seemed a little strange, but that's what we did. And I still have my polyester creepy shorts somewhere home. But seriously, when I was a little kid and I walked into that candy store and I saw Famous Monsters #2, and I said, "Ma, I want it," and she said, "No way." I just knew it had to be something good. So I eventually got them all, and now here I am. I'm doing my own magazine, thanks to Forry. And just wanted to thank him. And thanking everybody for helping support my magazine also. Thank you.
Okay, next we have the co-editors of Cinema Macabre, John Parnham, George Stover, and Steve Vertley.
Receiving a lot of appreciations this evening from writers and editors for your influence and helping them to create and write for their own magazines, their own fanzines. And while this is all very true, publisher George Stover and associate editor Steve Vertley and I would like to thank you for instilling in us the curse of the collecting mania. Not coins, not stamps, not sports cards, but posters, stills, press books, so that we could have our own diminutive Ackermansions. Steve has squandered his savings on thousands of CDs and LP soundtracks. George has spent a lifetime searching for obscure horror and fantasy and science fiction magazines, resulting in the second largest collection on the East Coast. I have the first. And where has all this led? We're flat broke. But it sure made Cinema Macabre an easier job to put together. And so thank you for placing that curse on us and for putting the macabre in Cinema Macabre.
Yeah, I think a lot of wives want to talk to Forry too. Okay, the next editor is the editor of Demons of the Mind, Bob Tennell.
I guess Forry has a habit of kind of popping up in my life and blessing me. The first time that I saw Famous Monsters, prior to that, I thought I was the only one, and my connection was limited to the Castle Films catalog. Remember, you'd get that and look at the artwork of like Bela Lugosi and stuff. And the day that I got Famous Monsters, I actually played football. I was an aberration, and I rushed a kick and was blinded and hospitalized and almost died. For 2 weeks I was blind in the hospital and didn't get to read the magazine. So Forry, I like to think you gave me reason to live. That and the Jack Palance Dracula that was going to be on, that I think was pushed because Nixon had the audacity to resign that night or something. Okay. And a few years later I met Forry at a convention. I don't know, I was about 16 or something. And that gave me the impetus to do Demons of the Mind, which did okay. And bizarrely enough, actually launched me professionally somehow. I think I just used it as a club, all the people I interviewed for the magazine, and make them give me jobs. And then, when I was fortunate enough to con a few $1 million out of people to make a film about our collective childhood, Forry was kind enough to show up, and the day we buried Burt Reynolds, Forry eulogized him. I don't know what else I can say. In the movie, yeah, sorry, buried Burt in the movie. You actually can't overstate his impact on so many levels, and I'm just glad we get to hang out with him.
Okay, next is, I hope he's here, the editor of the forthcoming It's Alive, Jeff Roberts.
Okay, I've really just begun to earn the right to stand up here with all these other people whose work I've read and enjoyed over the years, because the magazine that I'm working on with Forry is still in the works, although it will be coming later this year. So, what I'm going to do is turn to one of Forry's oldest friends, Ray Bradbury, who wrote one of the nicest things that I think has ever been written about Forry. It really sums it all up as only Ray can do. And if he were here tonight, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me borrowing these words. Forrest Ackerman is the most important fan, collector, human being in the history of science, fantasy, and fiction. His love for the field has remained constant since his childhood, and he has proved his love out by helping not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of young people along the way. Among those thousands must be counted people like Charles Beaumont and myself, Ray Bradbury, who came to him poor, but full of enthusiasm. He took us under his wing, gave us books, cheered us up, lent us money. The list of charitable things he has done runs off over the horizon. It would take days or months to write out his good deeds in a world where we like to pretend good people do not exist. His house, his collection, his love for our field will live long after him. But for now, the best thing we can wish is that Forrest Ackerman outlive us all.
The next editor is the editor of Little Shop of Horrors, Dick Clemenson.
Hello, Forry. In 1960, I was a skinny doofus kid. I liked baseball, and I liked monsters. And I discovered Little Shop of Horrors. I discovered Famous Monsters #10. And ever since then, it's been wine, women, and song. I still love monsters. My sons love monsters. My grandchildren love monsters. And Forry, it is all your fault.
Next we have the co-editors of Monsters from the Vault, Jim Clatterbaugh and Steve Cronenberg.
Just about everything that should have been said has been said, but when I was a kid, and I was one of those baby boomer kids that watched Shock Theater at the age of 9, there were two things to look forward to. The next edition of Shock Theater and the next issue of Famous Monsters. What you gave us, Forry, was something to take with us after Shock Theater went off the air and we had to wait a week for the next movie to come out. You gave us the stills from your still collection, which you shared with us. I think you're the first collector that ever shared his collection with all of the other fans. You gave us those great covers. You gave us articles not only on the old movies, but you previewed the new movies for us, which was another thing that we could look forward to. The next Hammer film that was coming out, the next Vincent Price, Roger Corman film that was coming out. All of it we found out about in your magazine. So I personally wanted to say thank you very much for sharing your still collection with us, for telling us about all those movies in the future, and for inspiring us to do our own magazines. Thank you very much, sir.
Now we have the co-editor of Movie Club, Don Lyford.
Forry, as a young man growing up in, as a child, a prepubescent child growing up in Baltimore, there were three events that I'll never forget. One of them was seeing The Mummy's Curse on Shock Theater for the first time. I couldn't believe it. My mother finally let me stay up late enough. We'd seen Ben-Hur, which was so long that it was late enough to stay up and watch Shock. Another was watching Gorgeous George wrestle Argentina Rocca. As I sat next to my grandfather, I thought I was in heaven. And the other one was walking into a magazine store and seeing an artist rendition of Vincent Price from The Pit and the Pendulum. I was awestruck. I couldn't believe what I saw. I borrowed the money from my mother, I bought the magazine, and I went home and I devoured it. And I anxiously awaited for every upcoming issue of Famous Monsters. It wasn't like buying a magazine, it was an event. And it instilled in me a love of reading that goes on for this day. I teach English and theater arts in high school. And I truly attribute my love of reading to DC Comics and Forry's Famous Monsters of Filmland. You may, Forry, have called yourself the poor man's Vincent Price, but you certainly gave a lot of young fans riches aplenty. Thank you, sir.
Is Buddy Barnett of Cult Movies.
If I'd known I was going to speak, I would have shaved. Sorry. Forry, you're the greatest guy on earth. I appreciate working with you. You do everything we ask you to do with no questions. And I'm just so glad I grew up in the 1960s when monsters were cool and you made them cool. Thank you.
Next we have the editor of Psychotronic Video, Michael Loudon.
Hello everybody. When I was a kid in Cleveland growing up, the three older men that influenced me the most were Billy, Ernie, and Forry. Billy was my father, still is my father, Billy Weldon, who was a magician. And he wasn't a horror movie fan, but he collected magic posters, which always had devils and decapitated heads and things like that. We had them all over the walls. Ernie was Ernie Anderson, who was the horror movie host in Cleveland at the time. And since the early 60s when I started buying Famous Monsters, I didn't just buy an issue. I would go to this store, wait around until one of them finally showed up. I'd take it home, read it over again, and then something that still horrifies collectors, I cut it up. I cut the pictures out, I made scrapbooks. And people ask me where my collection of FMs are. Well, I never had one, but I was such a good FM fan, I would go back and buy a second issue and cut that up so I could have the pictures on the other side. I would make scrapbooks, and I would study the scrapbooks, and the scrapbooks got to be this big, and this big. And at some point, my father, he threw them all away. And I'm sure this has happened to other people too, which made me more determined than ever to collect Famous Monsters and learn more about horror movies. And then I would go back and buy a third issue, and sometimes I would buy a fourth. And I would go home and watch the movies on Gallardi, and I simply wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for Forry Ackerman. And I just want to thank him for all the years of great magazines and also for being such a wonderful, gracious host at the Ackerman Mansion. And thank you very much.
The editor of Brutarian, Don Slemy.
I just want to say that unlike so many of the people that are up here, I didn't grow up a loner. I come from a solid middle class background and unfortunately was sent to all the right schools and did all the right things. Made the dean's list, went to law school, went to work for a law firm, made money. But I always cherished a dream of starting my own magazine and doing something much like Forry. And finally, about the age of 35, I'm now 45, I left the firm and went to work in a more downsized operation so that I could start my magazine. And 10 years later, I'm still losing thousands of dollars a year, but I'm keeping on with it. And it's really all because of Forry, because what he taught us was that it was okay to dream and to follow that dream wherever it may take you. And so I just like to thank Forry for giving people like me the courage to follow that dream, follow our dreams. Thank you.
Alrighty. Okay, editor and managing editor of Scarlet Street, Richard Valley and Tom Amorosi.
When I was a kid, I had two dreams. One was to go to Disneyland, and the other was to go to the Ackerman Mansion. And last fall, those dreams came true. Disneyland was wonderful, and we got to stay at the Ackerman Mansion, Tom and I. We were ushered into the Karloff Lugosi room, which was full of paintings and posters of Boris and Bela, and props and costumes and all sorts of wonderful things. And we stayed there for about a week, and it was just an incredible experience. Well, we left the house occasionally, yeah, that's true. Every night Tom would get up in the middle of the night, go into the bathroom, come out of the bathroom, and let out a yell because Bela Lugosi was standing in the corner. There was a life-size mannequin with a costume that Lugosi wore in a movie. Every morning I woke up clutching the side handles of a coffin that I was sleeping next to. It was just... Well, let me say that I love Disneyland, but the Ackerman Mansion was everything I ever imagined it was going to be and more. And Forry deserves incredible praise for opening his home to so many fans for so many years. I read my first Famous Monsters about 42 years ago, and it was a life-changing experience. We've been publishing Scarlet Street for 10 years now, and I can't say how proud I am that Forry has a regular column in our pages. That's a dream come true, too. And I just want to thank him for making my life and Tom's life so much richer and busier. Thank you very much.
We have the editor of SPFX, Ted Boas.
Sorry. This is kind of embarrassing because I thought this was going to be a roast. So I wrote all these jokes about us having sex and things, and now all these 30 jokes are useless, so I had to come up with something else. My parents, unlike others, were very supportive of my hobbies, and my mother actually was the one that bought me Famous Monsters #4. I think it was one with the War of the Worlds on the cover. And from then on, that was the first time I realized that there were other people out there that actually, collected this memorabilia and put it together in a magazine. And from that was the spark, as with everyone, that started off to making movies and making magazines. So as everyone has done, I'll keep it brief. Thank you very much, Forry.
Representing Starlog, we have contributor Tom Weaver.
I'm here under false pretenses. I'm actually only the consulting editor of Starlog. The real editor is Dave McDonald, who says that on behalf of himself, his publisher, his editorial staff, and Starlog's readers, that we all look forward to another 75 years of amazing stories and amazing accomplishments from Mr. Science Fiction.
Okay, editor of Video Ooze, and I know I probably said that wrong, Bob Sargent.
Like most of you in this room, I've been a sucker for monsters since I was a kid, and I was fortunate enough to grow up in a place called Downingtown, Pennsylvania, where I guess our main claim to fame there was that the Blob ate our diner. But fortunately, the drive-ins were left where I spent a lot of time, and also we had Channel 17 in Philadelphia that broadcast Scream In, and Dr. Shock used to run movies every Saturday night for me, and I used to ride my bike the 5 miles to the Charles News Agency to get my copies of Famous Monsters until I could convince my father to write a check to get me a subscription so I could have them sent to my house. And Forry, I think one of the things that was really important to me was my family and friends didn't really understand my fascination for monsters, but reading the letters in Famous Monsters and just it was a comfort to me because it let me know that I wasn't alone. Thank you, Forry Ackerman.
And to conclude our tribute to Forry, we have writer, filmmaker, rock and roller, and wrestler, Fred Allenright.
Hi, Forry. For the editor of Rotarian magazine, you're the kind of guy loners used to look for and beat up. I've known Forry since I was like this high. Forry's known me since I was like this high. Lucky for him. When I was 10 years of age, the one thing I could say about the magazine was that I probably knew more about literature and great writers than my parents did when I was 10 years old. And look where it got me. I don't think there's much I can say about Forry that I haven't already said before at his roast, at his birthday party, at his trial. So I have something here written by someone else that sums it up very nicely. It says, Forrest J. Ackerman is one of the kindest, most giving people I have ever encountered. His selfless generosity and accessibility has led more than one fan down the path to a career in professional filmmaking. Directors like John Landis, Joe Dante, and Steven Spielberg owe him a great debt of thanks. It was signed, Forrest J. Ackerman.
Well, I'm really overwhelmed by all these unexpected tributes. I'd like to share one with you that you wouldn't be aware of. Several years ago, a gentleman about 40 years old invited me to dinner. He said he wanted to explain to me that I had saved his life. And he said he was, not in a facetious fashion or anything, it was really true. He said when he was a youngster, his father was in prison for murder. His mother had committed suicide, and he really shrugged his shoulders and thought, what's the use of living? And he was going to kill himself. And he got the new issue of Famous Monsters, which featured his favorite film, King Kong. And he was avidly reading it and turning the pages, and all of a sudden it said, to be continued. And a month later he was out of the mood, so he felt that I, in effect, had saved his life. Something I can tell the director who put me in Frankenstein and Me, I don't think he's been aware of this. It was a long distance shot when I was at the funeral of the star. And he said, now for you, it doesn't matter what you say as the priest, because there's not going to be any sound, and it'll be a long distance. But after it was all over, I began to wonder what would happen if there was a lip reader in the audience, because I said, yea, though I trek through the valley of the Shatner of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy berry, they comfort me. Thus spake Zarathustra.
Editors who were here. You really helped make this tribute and our convention very special. Thank you so much.